I became a teacher because I wanted to make sure that students had the types of experiences that I had growing up um, without having to pay for it, basically. I felt a serious conviction that the education that my parents sacrificed to give me through private school should be the type of education that all students should be able to have access to. And I wanted to make that happen in my own classroom. Growing up, I spent a lot of time being other or categorized as other in my classrooms. In third grade, my parents moved me from my neighborhood school to a really exclusive private school in Miami. That was a great experience, but I was literally the only African American child in my grade. And there was probably one black child in every grade in the school. And we were on scholarship, most of us. And so, although I really enjoyed my school experience, I spent a lot of time trying to fit in and trying to figure out how to be included at school without becoming excluded in my neighborhood at home. And I would say I kind of became an expert at it. But I can remember my third grade teacher. I moved in third grade. So my third grade teacher at this private school was like my champion. She was, before it was like a cool thing to worry about inclusivity in a classroom, she was it. I don't know how probably had no trainings about it, but I could tell, found books for me. She'd pull me after school to just get to know me. She talked to my mom like she was her friend. And it made all the difference in me wanting to stay at that school. She would buy me like calendars with like African American historical figures. I don't know how to, she did special things just for me to make me feel included at that school. And she stood up for me when she knew people were making fun of me. And it made all the difference. It really did matter. What she did for me probably has helped me become the person I am today in all the white circles that I spend time in. Thinking about my educational history almost, in first and second grade, I went to a predominantly African American school. And I can remember in February, we celebrated Black History Month. And when I say we celebrated it, it didn't mean that we were just learning about Black history. We were really celebrating. And so we'd have assemblies and performances, and we'd learn the Black National Anthem and sing it in our assemblies. And I remember it being a really big celebration. At school, at church, at home, at family reunions, it was a big deal. And as I grew up and changed schools, I've said that I went to a private school from 3rd through 8th grade, where I was the only Black child in my grade. We did acknowledge Black History Month, but it shifted from being a celebration to being something that I really honestly dreaded being in the room for. I think my teachers' intentions were to teach history, but I didn't feel included in the conversation, or maybe even in the stories. I had classmates who would, because they didn't really know how to deal with what they were learning, would come up to me after, a lesson and just be like, would pull my hand out and compare, how our skin colors were different, and how because they were white, I shouldn't like them, or ask them, they were asking me for forgiveness or telling me to hit them, like weird things like that constantly, every February. And all I wanted to do was hide. I didn't know what to do with everybody's guilt that they were expecting me to deal with, even as like a 3rd, 4th, 5th grader. That's honestly what I remember about Black History Month for that whole entire time of my life, and it shouldn't have been like that. For me, I'm no longer in a classroom. I teach in the library, and my goal every year is to know every single one of my students. And when I say know, It means knowing their name, yes, but it also means for each kid to really feel like I have a relationship with them. I think that we could teach a lot of things from the front of the classroom that might make a difference. We could even teach things in circle time that help kids feel like they belong in the classroom. But there is nothing better to a student than feeling loved and known specifically by their teacher. And so to me, knowing my students doesn't just mean knowing their culture, but just like knowing what they like and what they don't like, because not every kid of a specific ethnicity is the same. And I know that full well because as an African American woman who grew up in so many different types of circles, my interests sometimes left me included in my Black community and sometimes made me feel really different, but still Black nonetheless. And so I've always wanted my kids to feel like individuals, like I care about their background, but I also care about just them as people. And I'm talking kindergartners, first graders, second graders, all the way up until they get to sixth grade. I want them to feel like, oh, Miss McConnell knows me. When I walk in the library, she knows me. And if I don't really know them, I kind of fake it until I make it, because it makes such a big difference to have people in the building who feel, or kids feeling like there are multiple people in the building that know them personally, and want them to be there. And so that's really what I see as my biggest role at school beyond the books and all of that is like being a place where kids come in and are like, oh, I'm known here. Like, I'm not invisible here. Everybody knows my name. And that matters to me. I'm thinking through different lessons that I've taught in the library that have, like when I'm reading the book, I can look out at my students and literally see some of their eyes like light up at the familiarity of the characters or the background or of the setting. And one of those books is, I taught a few weeks ago, it's called Saturday by Oge Mora. And it's just a story about an African-American little girl and her mother. But what makes it so significant to some of my students is that the little girl is super excited for Saturdays because her mother works Monday or Sunday through Friday, and the only day she has off is Saturdays. Now, that's not the life of some of our students, but some, they haven't read a book about a mom who's working all week long. They don't actually have anybody in their school acknowledge that their parent is always working and doesn't basically have a weekend at all. And so I feel like I see, some of them really light up at being able to share their connection with the story in that way. But then also throughout the day or throughout the Saturday that this little girl is so excited for, tons of things go wrong, including her getting her brand new hair messed up with water. And so I connect with that really well. And then a lot of my African-American students do, especially my African-American girls. And it's not talking specifically about race or culture, but there's just a connection that students are able to make with the story. All students really can connect to some parts of it, just the feelings of disappointment that happen throughout the day, but specifically some of our students with working class parents or our African-American students really connect with that story. Another I want to share about is called Amir's Picture Day. I haven't actually taught the book yet, but it is about a little girl who has gone through the month of Ramadan, observing it, and she has this conflict at the end because she's super excited for Eid, their big celebration, breaking the fast of Ramadan, and it falls on the same day as Picture Day. So of course, so much of the rest of the school is not thinking that this is like this huge holiday, an important day for this little girl. But she's thinking, man, do I go to school and, be included in this class picture, or do I celebrate with my family? And she's dealing with that. And when I read it, I learned a lot because I just thought about how many of our students celebrate these holidays at home and nobody acknowledges them at school. I'm not saying celebrates them, but just like acknowledges what's going on, knowing them and knowing their families and what's important to them throughout the year. A lot of it gets lost on us. And so that book just made me think, like, to make sure that students just feel seen throughout the year, because their big days might not be the same as my big days.